Hi everyone, welcome to our live chat with Amy Wakem from the Healthy Eating Advisory Service. We'll just begin today. I would like to acknowledge Australia's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, the traditional custodians of the lands, waterways and skies across Australia from where you are listening from. And I would also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to other Aboriginal people listening in today. I'm broadcasting today from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, which I think is where Amy is as well. So is that right, down in Melbourne? Yeah. Yeah. We're both, from locked down Melbourne, joining you today from our home offices. I was commenting that Amy's looks more professional though, with her whiteboards, etc., compared to my stacks of craft supplies and the ironing board, but we're all doing our best. So I'll throw over to Amy to give us a bit of an intro into herself and the Healthy Eating Advisory Service to kick us off.
Yeah, thanks, Alison. Thanks for having me and the Healthy Eating Advisory Service. We love working together with Parents' Voice, so always keen to work together. So yes, I'm Amy. I am a healthy eating expert at the Healthy Eating Advisory Service, specifically supporting schools and early years services. And personally, I have quite a history with working in particular with early years, but schools as well, in a number of different spaces and in different ways. So it's a really exciting space to work. I think working with kids and young children is always really a positive space to work because you can see that the work you do really can change the future. If you want to look, real blue skies, and that's certainly why a lot of people in the space that we are in do the work we do, because we want to see that future change. So I really love it. For those that aren't aware of who the Healthy Eating Advisory Service is, I'll just give you a little bit about us. So we provide free support to a number of settings in Victoria, including schools, to provide and promote healthier foods and drinks for those people within those settings. So with schools, that's all the people in that community. And we've supported a number of Victorian primary and secondary schools to make successful changes in their food and drink environment. And that goes beyond just the canteen, and we'll talk through that a little bit today. The Healthy Eating Advisory Service is delivered by Nutrition Australia Victoria, and we're supported by the Victorian government.
Yeah, so that means in terms of talking about your reach and impact, that means you're a Victorian focus, and that's where you do your work. And I was actually part of a forum earlier this week, which was talking about early childhood education centers. That's right, yes. Which I think, Amy, you presented at that one too. But there's there are some similar services across Australia, and so if parents listening in today and are keen and excited but live in a different state, if you reach out to us, we can put you in contact with similar services in most of the other states. So we're going to jump into, why it's important for school canteens and tuck shops to provide healthy food and drink options, and what could it look like. Before I throw to Amy, I just want to acknowledge the fact that a lot of Australia is staying safe at home at the moment, which means that schools have limited students on site, and most of them have their canteens or external food services closed. But at Parents' Voice, and Amy and I were talking, we think it's potentially a great opportunity to take that natural break as a parent and think about the provision of food in your schools and whether you would like it to be different. It kind of gives you a moment to sit and pause and reflect on it. And that's why we've gone ahead with the chat today, despite the situation that's occurring in a lot of states and territories around Australia at the moment, because we think the information is still valuable and could still be applied now, or potentially when your school goes back. But you can kind of get the opportunity to take the information today and think about it and how you might want to create some change in your school. So on that note, Amy, why is it important that we have healthy schools and tuck shops and canteens, and what does it look like?
Yeah, I could probably talk about this for a while, so I'll try and keep it to, the real key points. But I guess from your point, Alice, I, certainly agree. Obviously, schools are last year and this year again have been, in a very different climate and have been operating very differently. But, I think the hope from this is that it might plant the seed a little bit for those parents out there that might have been thinking of wanting to improve the food environment at their school, just to give you something to digest, maybe some next steps for when that time comes. So, I think it's still really relevant. And as, I was saying before, the importance of children and the preventative health and, how we can improve the future for our children. That's, even more relevant. I think COVID's really helped us to see how important the future is and how important we want to be healthy in that future and what that could look like. So I think that really feeds into what we're talking to today, even though, yes, we're very aware that schools aren't in the same space that, ideally they would be with their operations right now. So, I mean, I think we can all agree that we want children to have the opportunity to be successful. We want them to be happy, healthy, and resilient. And we all have really, great pictures of what that could look like. And we also know that fueling children with the right foods is so important and is really essential for their growth and development, especially when you look short term. I mean, when they're really young, you can see that growth is so quick and so rapid, and it's so important that they have the right foods so that they can be, at the peak of their health as much as we can. But we're also seeing a lot of really interesting evidence come out to fortify that connection between seeing the provision and promotion of healthier foods and drinks connected to children's mood, connected to children's mental health, connected to their learning and in turn their academic performance. And that's why they're at school. They're at school to learn, they're at school to digest all this information, to be those sponges. And we know that when they have the right food and they're fueled the right way, that their brain certainly can be that sponge a lot more effectively. So it is so important in that school space that they have the right food. We also know that students on average consume about 40% of their energy intake just during school hours alone. So that's not including any out of school hours care they might go to or anything like that. That's quite a chunk of what they eat and the amount of energy that they need in their day. And so it's a really, it just, I guess, highlights that schools can play a really key role in encouraging healthy eating habits for students and staff. So whilst the right food is really important for that short-term benefit of, concentration, being alert, their growth and development physically, it's also super important to build and create this norm around healthy eating habits that we then will see. And, that's our long-term goal, I think, with all the work we do, is to see that health be really great in the future as well. So that long-term health connection is there as well. So there's a lot of really important reasons why food is important within school. Whether the canteen is open 5 days a week or not, there's so many spaces schools can encourage those healthy eating behaviors and eating habits. So that's why it's so important. And that's why I guess you can hopefully tell why we're so passionate about what we do at the Health Eating Advisory Service with the work we do with schools.
Yeah, absolutely. And also Parents' Voice. So one of the reasons we reached out to Amy and that we've done a whole lot of work in school canteens is that's one of the topics that we get the most kind of contact from parents that hasn't been initiated from us. So we haven't asked a question. It's the one that we get the most emails about. And it's usually a parent who is really passionate and how can they convince other parents. So what can parents do if they want to support their kids' schools to provide healthier options?
Yeah, there's so many spaces that you can work and there's so many opportunities. So I want to highlight those, but before we get into that, I do want to talk a little bit about, I guess, a bit of a model that helps to guide the successfulness of making any kind of healthy eating change within a school. So when it comes to looking at what is the best approach or what is one of the best ways to work towards improving a healthy eating environment in schools, there's an approach called the whole of school approach that we will always use as a basis for what we encourage with at the Health Eating Advisory Service, and a number of different organizations use this model. And what it really means is that you look at the whole environment, the whole space, and really consider all the places and people that you can involve to make the change sustainable and embedded into the culture. Because if you don't do that, then, you know, it may leave with that passionate parent. All those changes, all that hard work could leave when that person leaves, because they may have been the only key driver for the work. So it's really important to take you know, a step back and think about how can you have this approach when you're making changes in a school, so that it can be more successful and more embedded, and it stays around and becomes just a part of what the school does. So it's about thinking about all the areas within the school. So that's a canteen or a tuck shop if you've got one, or external food provision. So it might be lunch orders you get from the milk bar down the road, or it could be a company that brings food in externally. It's also looking at what happens in the classroom and how that links to curriculum work that teachers are doing, sports events, special occasions, or, you know, events that the school puts on, theme days, all that kind of thing, breakfast clubs and programs as well. So all those spaces that food is provided or promoted in any way. And then it also includes, like I said, thinking about everyone in that space who is involved in your whole school community. It's not just the canteen's role, it's about engaging everyone, bringing them along for that journey and involving them. Because when you involve people in change, then they're going to accept it. They're much more likely to be okay with it. But then you also get help. So you're not doing all the work yourself. And that is so important and really crucial for success as well. So think about everyone that can be involved in that community, because that's what you really need to create that healthy food culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think what's always key to remember is that it's about balance. We often do get inquiries as well, or, you know, parents calling and saying, you know, my school, you know, it feels like it's gone too far one way, or it's, you know, it's too far on one end of the scale. And, you know, I'm always giving advice about balance. Balance is so important. So it's about balance and in providing choice, especially when it comes to healthy choices. But it's also about meeting the needs of the community, understanding what people want. And that's where that engagement comes in and involving everyone. But it's also about thinking of that long-term goal of, you know, setting a bit of a norm around healthy eating, and how can you achieve that and in a balanced way. So in Victoria, we use the Department of Education and Training school canteen policy to help guide the advice we give. It spells out a little bit around what foods that you should have every day, and then those foods that should be had in moderation. And that's where that balance comes in, understanding that, you know, the canteen doesn't have to be all, you know, leafy greens. There's balance there, and it's about finding the balance that works for your school. And that's the other thing that we would say. You know, it doesn't look the same. What a healthy canteen looks like isn't the same, or what a healthy school looks like isn't the same for every school. It's different for every community.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I was going to say that at my school canteen, I've been actually really lucky to have, you know, my kids go to a school with a whole group of parents who are a bit passionate about this, and I haven't had to be the person advocating, which has been very, which I have appreciated, given that I do it all day at work. But we have the balance that we have is that the canteen is a green canteen, unless something's been handmade in the canteen. So it gives us some space to use up the soft apples we can't spiralize anymore to make apple muffins, which, because you do add a little bit of sugar, or you add a bit of olive oil or butter, depending on how you make them, they kind of often tip over into that, you know, that kind of mid-moderate category. And so we've found that's a good balance that allows the canteen to adapt to the ingredients that they have and what they're eating, but it gets made on site.
Yeah, which is fantastic. And that's often what we see, you know, schools are doing. You know, they do want to have all those great healthy options, but, you know, as you know, a lot of the policies across Australia allow, because balance isn't so important, you know, it is okay to have those foods that do have maybe a little bit of added sugar or fats in moderation. It's all around, like I said, that balance, but also having, I guess, more of the green, so that you are encouraging that as the, everyday choice. And, when children are still learning what that all means, it is really important. And children can be easily persuaded. I think Parents Voice knows that very well, with your campaigns around advertising. So, it is about sometimes counteracting a little bit and, what they see outside of the school environment, where they may be subjected to a lot of, fast food marketing on their way to school. So it's about, again, trying to build that balance where, okay, but when they're at school, they're taught about, the foods that fuel their bodies, and that helps them to get that better understanding of how they all the foods that we have in our climate and in our environment, how they can all play a different role, and how they can understand that best for their bodies, and how they work and learn at school. So I think another important thing that we always point out to schools or people working to make healthy changes at schools is that change shouldn't happen overnight. Generally, the best approach is to take really small, feasible little steps or bites towards the goal that you're working towards, whether it be a healthy canteen or a healthy school environment as a whole. Based on what you've decided is right for your school community. It's not about achieving perfection, but it's got to be realistic, and you've got to be able to take those simple steps that work you towards your end goal. And the small steps are often things that make a big difference, and it's hard to see when you're probably in the thick of it, but every little step in the right direction really does make a big difference. And especially when you're looking at shifting, something that's been in place for a long time, those small steps are the things that will get you to that goal. It just, sometimes it can feel like it's taking a little while, but they're the ways that you can make that change successfully. So we do have some really great case studies on our website if people are interested in seeing how other schools have done it. And they all do them differently. Like I said, we've had Beaumaris Primary School a little while ago that connected their healthy eating work that they were doing with environmental sustainability, which was really interesting. So they had all these amazing bins outside their canteen for collecting food scraps that they could compost or feed to their worm farm, as well as, their soft plastics and other things, and had some really great ways of looking at reducing waste, as well as improving the freshness of their food and the healthy eating components that went with that. And then we've also had schools like Clonard College in Geelong that have worked towards healthy eating changes to help improve student mental health, because they identified mental well-being as a really key priority, and healthy eating was one way that they work towards improving that. So there's lots of different ways that schools can work towards healthy eating. It doesn't have to be towards the goal of getting kids to have more veg, although that's always a great goal. It could just be because, you see, like I said, that connection with mental health is really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think when it comes to you as a parent, what can you do? Certainly, there's a lot of spaces you can work. I think the first step is finding allies and finding other interested parents or people within the environment that you're working, the school community, that are also interested, considering maybe forming a group. Again, share that load so that you're not doing all the work yourself. You could consider kind of doing a bit of a review of the school food environment now, and thinking about the areas you think could be improved. And then engage with, again, as I said before, engagement's really important. So engage with the community. It might involve getting school leadership to help you with that, but you could use surveys or newsletter articles or things like that to drum up interest and engage with the school community. Getting school leadership on board is also very important, and it might involve, maybe you go and talk at the P&C to see, who else is interested, get their buy-in, and then of course use programs like ours. I'll talk to, before we wrap up, the places you can go to find out more about us, but also if you're in other states, other support programs you can use the help that's out there, because there often is something out there to help you, so you're not doing it alone. And I think that segues nicely into some of the support I know Parents Voice has worked on in the past and have some plans to work on more going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So it seems like it was only yesterday that you and I, Amy, were talking in that second session of our Changemakers program, because we lost most of last year, I feel. But anyway, it was the end of 2019. We piloted a project, an online training program to train parents on creating change. It was specifically for schools as our first topic. So we go through basics in advocacy, and then we had a great second session with Amy talking about all of the specificness of school canteens and what we can do there. And so actually, if anyone wants, we've still got all of those recordings and those resources, we can send them. But the best news is we're looking at doing a second session, a new version, would be very similar, later in the year, later in this year. So we're working on our the content at the moment, and there'll be some stuff about schools, but it'll also be a bit broader. So we're talking about kind of all the settings that that families and kids access, from, sporting clubs and leisure centres to schools and those sorts of things. So it's going to be great. And if people are keen, because I know you will be, everyone's keen, go onto our website and make sure you're part of our email list, because that's where we'll be sending out the information. Hope Evie should be in the comments, and she'll put the join link in there so you can jump in and head over and make sure you subscribe to our email list, because it's going to be a great program, and we're going to keep it pretty, it's going to be pretty snappy, and it's going to be, but it's all based, it's all evidence-based. It's based on research, but also based on the experience of the people who work with Parents Voice and the people we work with, on how you create change and how you can be the change maker in your community, and how we can support you to do that. So, which is very exciting. Thanks for throwing to me there, Amy, because we're quite keen.
Yeah. No, it was so fun to do that work. It feels like last year, but it wasn't.
It really does. It really does. All of last year is gone, and unfortunately this year's not looking that great, but we're going to have a change makers program, so it's going to be better. So that should be a bit later in the year, hopefully not too late, but we're working with some partners on that too, which is very exciting. So stay tuned for more information there.
Definitely. And I was also going to mention, I think often we get as well schools that are looking for resources that we might have to support parents with sending lunch boxes to school. So if you are a parent and you're interested in learning a little bit more about packing a healthy lunchbox, we do have a page on our website that you can check out no matter where you are in Australia. And it's got some really great resources there, featuring our most popular resource, which is the Pick and Mix lunchbox resource. So we often get a lot of people telling us they love that one. So it's right at the top. You can't miss it. Check that out if you're also kind of wanting that support for what you send to school as well, or just some new inspiration. Often it's just good to get some new ideas.
Useful.
Although at the moment, probably not as
well. I was going to say, I think
packing a lunchbox for the day, maybe.
Well, it potentially can be a useful thing if you have the time, and I know we're all a bit stretched working from home, etc., with the kids being here as well. But if you have some time, prepping snacks just in the fridge. If your kids only eat carrot if you chop it up, or they'll only eat over if you've prepared it in a particular way. If you can do it in advance and stick it in a tub in the bottom of your fridge, it's a good way to encourage your kids to get more fruit and veg into them over the day. And the Pick and Mix resource might give you some new ideas for what to include in the box. I have a strange child who will only eat a carrot if it's not chopped or peeled in any way. She eats the whole thing, top, tail, the whole thing, which is very handy for me. It's very low key, no extra effort for me, which is good. We're gonna have to go to questions too. We've only got a few minutes left, but Amy's gonna start putting your questions in the chat. But Amy's just going to quickly go through how the Healthy Eating Advisory Service and similar orgs can help you create this change.
Yeah, so focus on the links that will go in the chat to kind of learn more, but I'll just give a quick recap. So like I had already mentioned, there's food and drink policies across Australia for every state and territory that can support you to kind of, I guess, get a sense of what you could work towards when you're making changes in schools. But there's also programs and associations to support you. So one of the links in the chat will show you a resource that shows you where you go if you're in which state you're in. In Victoria, we're really fortunate that there's a lot of different orgs and programs to support a lot of the spaces of school. of the schools. So another link in the chat will take you to a huge list of really awesome organisations, including ours, that can support you, particularly for the Healthy Eating Advisory Service. As I'd mentioned earlier, we're a free service, so you can get free training to learn more about the policy and how to promote healthy changes. There's all sorts of fact sheets, recipes, fundraising and event ideas. If you're looking to just tackle healthy fundraising at your school, check those out. Resources for healthy classroom activity ideas, all that kind of stuff. Like I said, lunchbox resources, you name it, we hopefully have something on it. And we also have an email and info line if you've got really specific questions you need help with. So if you're in Victoria, hit us up or call us or email us, and we will we'll try and help you as best we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that the link that we'll put up will has that information that I mentioned earlier that you could also reach out to us too, and we will be putting it in the next e-newsletter as well. So again, another reason to subscribe to our e-newsletter, so that even if you're not in Victoria, it will point you in the right direction. And that other resource that Amy mentioned, which will show you the other organisations that help support healthy eating in schools in Victoria. Although really, I think the Healthy Eating Advisory Service is like the centre bit, in a sense, of all of that. But there are some amazing programs, amazing organisations out there doing really interesting things. So my apologies. I was sure I'd muted all of my notifications before we started. But so first question. So the issue is we will always be that if we have 20 bad options and 20 healthy options and one bad option to provide balance, the one is the one that always gets ordered. So what do we do?
So, I mean, I think what I would focus on to start with for that is, I guess, understanding a little bit more around that. So it might be just trying to get a little bit more understanding as to why that one's so appealing. And maybe the answer is, there could be more engagement to get ideas of the green options, so that the green options or the healthier options on the menu are things that you have a bit more understanding of, that the students would enjoy. So can you do a survey, or could you do a competition where you get the students to create a burger, for example? And can you use positive peer pressure? I've certainly seen this happen, and everyone will want to order Andy's burger because how cool, they've got a burger named after Andy, who's my mate in grade 6. So can you think of ways to get that where I talked about engagement being so important? Make sure you're engaging with everyone, because if they're engaged, then they're part of the solutions for you. You don't have to come up with them on your own, but they're also going to be more successful. So I'd look at that. The other thing you can look at is promotion. So we do have some information on our website that talks about promotion, how to make the healthier options more appealing, a little bit more front of mind, and marketed in maybe a little bit of a different way. You don't have to be a marketing expert, but there's a few simple things you can do to make those green options more appealing that can help with that too.
Yeah, I would definitely second the chatting to kids. So I've seen on a lot of the case studies, and my experience is that just changing the way something is potentially served can make a huge difference. So putting doing the fruit salad and putting it in a cup, change the kids' perception. My kids' schools, there's devastation amongst all the kids when they run out of the watermelon icy poles, which are literally just watermelon frozen, basically. But I've been there on the canteen when we've run out, and it's not pretty. And you say, well, we've got all of these other things which are usually not, they're not as healthy, and no, I just wanted a watermelon icy pole. Can you, so, but they wouldn't necessarily buy a watermelon slice, but we freeze it and they'll eat it. So
yeah, and you call it an icy pole, and it's a language too sometimes, right? If you call it something cool, or a bit more appealing, then yeah, they certainly will try it. You can also do fun things like, if you've got something new on the menu, do like tiny little tasters for kids to try, because they might not be like as sure to try like that weird green spaghetti you've got or whatever it is. But if they get to have a little taste for free, they probably won't say no, and then they might actually really like it. So there's lots of different things you can think about to get kids to just have a go at something new. That's often one of the barriers too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, second question, why do kids only eat yellow or white food? And what can I trick my child if it's a yellow carrot? It's a very specific question about carrots there. Can I say just to chime in, we've been growing multicolored carrots in the garden. My daughter, with her carrot obsession, has declared that the orange ones still taste the best. So who knows? But do you have any amazing tips here, Amy?
I think certainly fussy eating is a common problem and a common developmental issue that all children will go through. There's certainly times where they're more likely to be picky at certain ages, but I think at the end of the day, what we know is the more kids are involved, again, it's around engagement and involvement with new things or things that they're maybe not as sure about. The more they're involved, the more likely they are to try it. So I would encourage that parent to have fun, make it like, judgment free, guilt free, and just try cooking or using science as a way to explore new foods. Artwork, even you can use food scraps. We've got some videos on our website about introducing new foods. I'd check those out for this parent, but there's lots of ways you can introduce new foods without like expecting the child to eat it. Just get them to be around these new foods and explore them in a fun, non-judgmental way. And when they're more involved and they're more curious, then you're certainly much more likely to get them to just like give it a kiss, just have a nibble. Just, can you taste it? Because I think mine's a bit crunchy and I'm not sure if yours is crunchy. You just make it really fun. Don't focus on the eating it. And over time, more exposure that they get to these different foods, they're certainly more likely to try different foods. And working in early years, I've certainly seen that firsthand. Yeah, so it can be possible. It just takes a bit of thinking outside of the box, being a bit more experimental, having more fun with it, and yeah, don't put too much pressure on yourself as well.
Definitely. I think that really all of us as parents have more than enough on our plate. That to make dinner particularly a battleground is just not in anyone's interests. It just adds to your stress and doesn't help the kids try new foods. So my personal tip, just from me in my non-professional capacity, is that tacos and more recently just roast potatoes with random things to put on the top of them. Put all of the random things in bowls in front of the kids, and they actually try all sorts of different flavors and textures and vegetables that I wouldn't have thought that they would try.
Yeah.
And because you've put them in charge of what they're eating and what's on their plate, and you'll actually be surprised by what they might try. Yeah. Particularly if you're sitting there modeling putting a whole lot of veggies on your plate as well. So give it a go, but yeah, don't add to your stress level either.
That's it.
Make it fun. Okay, third and final question, because we are over time, but I wanted to get to this last question. It says, Amy, what are your thoughts on healthy lunchboxes and the influence schools can have in this space? I know there are some instances where some schools have gone too far with policing what parents provide, but on the flip side, when schools don't have a policy on that, on this, trying to do the right thing as a parent is hard when your kid complains that they don't get the same treat foods that their friends do in their lunchboxes.
It is, it is certainly a challenge. Like this parents pointed out, because it could go from one end of the spectrum to the other. So I think certainly there's space for schools, as we said, because kids are having so much food at school. There is certainly a space, and I think it's really important for schools to be in charge of encouraging and promoting healthy choices. But what that translates to, I think, it does need to be tailored to the community and their needs. I think certainly, in areas where there is more concern about, the health of lunchboxes, maybe there is need to be a little bit more encouraging and have, a bit more guidance for families and parents. But I certainly think, when you're at the other end of the spectrum where it's so heavily policed that people, I've heard and I've gone to even like professional research conferences where they talk about parents just feel like you can't, like, it's nude food, so they just chuck stuff out of packets in there just to meet the like requirements, but it's too much. It adds extra pressure and burden. Like you said, no parent needs that. So I think it's finding a middle ground. I think, you know, the example of your child comparing their lunch to others, I mean, that is, you know, tricky. And I guess that's sadly the reality is, I guess you're going to have your kids comparing everything beyond lunch boxes. But I guess for me, I think I would focus on, I guess, working with your child to understand why you pack those things in lunch boxes. You know, if they're eating it, then they obviously like it. So, you know, just, you know, it could be talking to them about like, these foods are really important to fuel you. You know, we have our, you know, special foods these times, and, you know, maybe you could get them to encourage their friends to, you know, have, you know, other healthy options. But I guess, yeah, it is a challenge. I can't say there's an easy solution for it, but I mean, you know, maybe it is talking to the school about how you can encourage healthier lunch boxes. And maybe it is the parents just need a information session that the school facilitates to teach some parents a little bit more about what you should pack in a lunchbox. Maybe they need inspiration, or maybe they're just looking for a bit more information as well. So, I mean, yeah, I'd be thinking about maybe why some of those lunch boxes coming in look quite different, and yeah, how can you positively just encourage that the lunch boxes that come in are a bit more healthy, maybe, if that's something that that parent's concerned about.
Definitely, because I think you know, I don't think it's useful when lunch boxes are policed. But I do know that some schools do things like they will do like a brain break in the morning. What is it called? Brain food, something like that. So that
Yep.
specific breaks where you can be in class and you can eat something, but it has to be a fruit or a vegetable. So it encourages parents to at least pack a fruit or vegetable for their kids to eat during that break.
Yeah.
And like you said, information sessions, I think, are a relatively low-key way of just trying to, like that whole school approach about this is what we encourage at the school, and kind of easing parents into it rather than policing what happens in the lunchbox, because I think that just then falls on kids. So it's not helpful. Do you have time, Amy, for one last question? Excellent. Okay, cool. So canteens, so food allergies, dairy in particular, are an obstacle for us in the canteen, or using the canteen. Everything seems to contain cheese. Is it unreasonable to request that a non-dairy version be made available?
That's a really good point, because I think, yeah, certainly dairy is becoming something we're seeing more as a bit of an intolerance or allergy within children and adults in Australia. We certainly have quite a few allergies and intolerances in Australia. I don't think it's unreasonable to talk to the canteen and find, you know, how they can find ways for them to be more inclusive. I think it's really important for a school as a whole to be inclusive across a number of different spaces. You know, maybe they're just not aware that there's needs. You know, and if you don't feel like there's a real proper avenue for it, maybe the school needs, you know, to investigate an avenue for parents to give feedback on the offerings of the canteen for healthfulness, but maybe also obviously for, you know, allergies and intolerances. So I think I would encourage you probably to go to the school, whoever you're talking to, about the menu, and be open-minded about solutions. I think sometimes it can be more difficult if you know, you've got this one specific, I mean, it just depends on what you're asking them to do, but I think if it's dairy, maybe you have a few ideas that you can suggest for them, just so that there's a bit more openness for them to be involved with that change as well. They're probably more likely to take on your feedback. If you've got a few like, hey, my child's, you know, yeah, dairy intolerant, I'd love to explore some options that the canteen can have so they can be involved. We'd love to, you know, help support the canteen. What options can we explore? I've got a few ideas, but I'm happy to hear yours as well. You know, get them involved as well. So don't just, I would suggest not just going in with your one idea, but being open to come up with ideas together.
Yes, I can say question didn't come from me, but my daughter is the carrot lover, is lactose intolerant. And I actually discovered recently, quite by accident, that our canteen has a lactose-free cheese sitting in the fridge. And so anything that they've made from scratch, they can actually substitute the cheese for us, which was a happy accident
Fantastic.
we discovered. And so I think, yes, it's great advice that just to go and have a kind of casual chat And we've decided we'll supply the lactose-free cheese as a kind of donation to the school, so that we know that there's always some sitting there in the fridge. We're kind of meeting canteens halfway on some of this. Can be useful. Okay, so we've reached the end, well over the end of our time. Thank you, Amy, for staying on with us. I knew this one would be a popular topic. So I can highly recommend the Healthy Eating Advisory Service website. So it's at heas.health.vic.gov.au, but if you just type in Healthy Eating Advisory Service to Google, it'll come straight up. And do you have anything coming up that you wanted to highlight here? Or is everything still under wraps? I think they've got some secret projects.
There are some really exciting things coming out. There's a really exciting movement coming up that will encourage schools to provide and promote healthier foods and drinks. So yeah, it's close. We can't say a lot, but the best way to just stay in touch with anything that's coming out, any new initiatives, any new resources we have, anything like that, follow us on social media. So if you haven't already, click that follow button, and then join our mailing list as well. Be in both of our mailing lists, and you'll hear pretty much everything, hopefully, about healthy eating that goes on around Victoria as well as Australia. So yeah,
definitely. And I can assure you that both organisations don't email out too far, so too often. We're not going to be spamming you. It'll all be important and interesting, I promise. Just again to say that we've got our change makers coming up, so that's one of we're really excited to be working on that again, and we hope to see a lot of you as part of that training. And we put a whole lot of links in the chat today as part of our conversation, so on the Facebook chat, but we'll also be putting things into the next newsletter that goes out, so people will be able to get all of those resources as well. So make sure you subscribe to everything. I feel like I should have worn a t-shirt, just subscribe. But if you want to create change, that we're, Healthy Eating Advisory Service, if you're in Victoria, is the place to go. We can direct you to the other ones, and we can help support you as well. So reach out and chat. Thank you so much for joining us today, Amy, and thank you everyone who's listened along, and to Evie, who's been our Facebook Live moderator there in the chats, in the chat section. So thank you, Evie. And we'll see you all another time. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.